Part 95. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 941. Chapter 941. It's intentional. Pei Xian looked gloomy and turned his head slightly. She clutched the official documents so tightly that the thick, white paper was twisted and deformed, leaving ugly marks. "I don't want you to die," she murmured, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Please, don't do this, don't make me feel that you will leave me anytime, anywhere." Pei Xian said hoarsely, "Everyone has his own destiny." She cried, "That is not your life. Pei Xian, if you die, I will follow Li Lei back to the headquarters and give birth to a lot of children. I will make you mad." She was speaking incoherently, not caring about the meaning of her words at all. "There is a speech disorder." He looked shocked for a long time, and then suddenly whispered, "Xiaoling, if I die, you should live with Li Lei obediently, let him protect you, take care of you, and have a lot of children. When the children grow up, they will be filial to you." She was completely stunned. "What did you say?" He closed his eyes, and even his breathing seemed to be in burning pain. If he could, why would he be willing to give up his beloved woman? But he is about to die, he can no longer protect her, and he can no longer see her carefree and happy. She is so innocent and simple, and even a small plot can hurt her. Only let that man protect her. In the years and the world that he could not touch, he hoped that she could continue to be happy. Xiaoling shook her head while crying, looked at him, and became angry. "Pei Xian, you are not allowed to die. Do you hear that? You are not allowed to die. If you die, I will not be happy. I will be depressed all my life, do you understand?" She screamed at the top of her lungs and slowly knelt down at his feet. He looked mournful and hugged her tightly, letting her head rest on his leg. "You are so cruel." He stroked her smooth crow-green hair with his fingers and murmured to himself at a volume that she could not hear. "Xiaoling, you are so cruel, do you know?" He wanted to. He is alive, watching her and Li Lei's happiness, jealousy gnawing at his bones, unable to escape for the rest of his life. But he actually wanted to promise her so much. He closed his eyes slightly and said softly, "Okay, I won't die." Speaking as if he can decide. This day, she stayed with him for a long time. Since he has promised her not to die, he can't read the official documents so hard. The two of them walked for a while in the small garden as a way to recuperate. Pei Xian deliberately picked some happy things to tell her to make her laugh, and she laughed in cooperation for the sake of his health. Everything seems to be in harmony. Until, without warning, she collapsed from exhaustion under a lilac tree. "Xiaoling! Madam!" Pei Xian and the bodyguards' expressions changed and they exclaimed in unison. They rushed her to the bedroom and called the family doctor to see her. The bodyguard called Li Lei, and soon Li Lei came over in a hurry. "Pei Xian, if something happens to Xiaoling, I won't be done with you." This was the first thing Li Lei said when he rushed through the door. As he spoke, he reached Xiaoling's bedside as quickly as possible and held her cold hand. "Xiaoling, Xiaoling," he called urgently, "wake up, don't scare me." On the side, the family doctor of the Pei family said, "Mr. Li, don't worry, Miss Ling fainted suddenly because of some exertion. It's not serious. She just needs to rest for a few days. I gave her some glucose and she is sleeping now. She feels very safe and the baby in her belly is fine." Li Lei's eyes fell on her flat belly. "For more than 2 months of pregnancy, I can't see anything, but it is a period of unstable fetus, and people can't help toss. Baby, you must be well." He put his face on her belly and said softly. With great difficulty, the doctor from the Li family arrived. The doctor re-examined Xiaoling and told him, "Sir, Madam is indeed fine. She is just overworked and too sad. She can just rest for a while." This doctor from the Pei family. He said to him. He looked at his colleague and nodded. It was handled appropriately. Li Lei breathed a sigh of relief when he heard someone he trusted say this. I want to take her away. Li Lei looked at Xiaoling, who was sleeping. Sir, my wife's current condition is not suitable for movement. It is best to wait for her to wake up naturally. The Li family's doctor stopped her. Li Lei was a little hesitant. This was the Pei family, Pei Xian's bedroom. How could he feel comfortable letting his woman lie on his bed? Pei Xian smiled half-heartedly. Don't you love her very much? Yes, this is my bedroom, my bed. Xiaoling has slept on it countless times before. She even chose the mattress herself. She likes this bed. The bed is very comfortable to sleep in. Are you going to move her regardless of her safety just because of temporary jealousy? Li Lei said in a deep voice, don't make me beat you. It's not that the Pei family didn't have a guest room, but he let her sleep in his own bed. It's obviously the reason. Meaning of. Pei Xian provoked, okay, let's beat her up. It's best to wake her up and show her how impulsive and naive her husband is. He was now confident and had nothing to lose, but Li Lei was different. It's because this man cares so much about her that he doesn't want her to suffer the slightest injustice. In that case, even if he dies, he will still have a peaceful mind. Sure enough, Li Lei forced himself to calm down and lowered his fist. He turned around, lowered his head, and looked at the sleeping woman on the bed. Xiaoling, I'm here, I'm with you. In her sleep, she moved slightly and held his hand. Li Lei. Her voice was as low as a mosquito. Li Lei was overjoyed. He suppressed the excitement in his heart and said softly to her, it's me, I'm here. I'm sorry. She didn't open her eyes. She seemed to be awake from a dream, and even speaking she seemed to have exhausted all her strength. I'm scared. What are you afraid of? He hugged her body, but she didn't resist. Afraid. She paused for a long time, and when he thought she fell asleep again, she said softly, I'm afraid something will happen to Xian, and the baby. His heart was slightly shaken, and he instinctively raised his eyes and glanced at Pei Xian not far away. My own woman can't forget this man even in her sleep. He even called him Zi Hung. Not Pei Xian, not some beast, she clearly called her by the same name when they fell in love in the previous life. So intimate and familiar. Xian. Pei Xian had a smile of victory on his face. Li Lei felt that there were hundreds of red-hot coals exploding deep in his heart, and it was like countless steel needles were pricking him, but he had to restrain himself and said in a gentler voice, the baby is okay, Zi Hung, it's okay. A smile appeared on her sleepy lips. Li Lei. She found a comfortable position in his arms and murmured, you are the best, I love you the most. After saying that, she stopped talking and fell into a deep sleep. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 942. Chapter 942 Visiting the Patient. He was slightly startled, and the countless steel needles in his heart disappeared, followed by an uncontrollable joy that was about to explode. So what if she cares about Pei Xian? But what she loves most is him. They are the couple who will stay together for a lifetime. A bright smile appeared on Li Lei's face, and he kissed her forehead gently. Go to sleep, I will always be with you. The family of three squeezed into the old but comfortable bed, enjoying the rare quiet time. Pei Xian, at some point, turned around and left. Long corridor, dark room. Pei Xian lit a cigarette and took a deep breath. He should be happy, shouldn't he? I saw that Xiaoling was cared for by a man who cared about her so much for the rest of her life. But why is there a strong sense of unwillingness in my heart? Burning pain in lungs, unable to breathe. Unexpectedly, he remembered how she cried and begged him not to die in the study today. If she could survive, wouldn't she? She wouldn't be sad. Does he still have a chance to win her back in the long remaining time of his life? The smoke curled up, blurring his cold and godlike face. Sir, he was the doctor of the Pei family. He followed him out and was shocked when he saw that he was actually smoking. Your lungs are not good to begin with. You can't smoke anymore. Pei Ziyan put out his cigarette casually, notify the hospital and prepare for surgery. Surgery, the doctor was startled and put on a serious face. Sir, have you really decided to have tumor resection? You must know that your current condition is not suitable for surgery and the risk is very high. I know, Pei Ziyan interrupted him, a little impatiently, if he fails, wouldn't he die a few months in advance, but if he succeeded, he would not have to die and could continue to be by Xiaoling's side. Although, the probability is so slim that it can almost be ignored. But he had had enough of watching her in the arms of other men but being unable to do anything. Whether it's life or death, it's better to give it a happy life. The doctor looked at him worriedly. Tumor resection surgery is usually performed on patients with early-stage cancer. At that time, the lesions have not spread and metastasized, and it is easy to remove them completely, control the disease, and even cure them. But what about terminally ill patients? There are too many lesions in the body and it is impossible to cut them cleanly. Moreover, the operation will greatly consume the patient's physical strength and accelerate the patient's death. My husband has already made clear the treatment plan with them, that is, no surgery, only conservative treatment, and strive for the maximum survival time, about a few months. Then, after he has taken care of family affairs and arranged his funeral, he will calm down. The ground died. But what kind of madness is smoking these days? The doctor tried his best, but still couldn't persuade Pei Ziyan, so he had to go to his attending doctor and expert team to reformulate the treatment plan. The doctor couldn't help crying when he thought that his husband might die on the operating table. The surgical plan is being formulated in full swing. Xiaoling is also getting better day by day under Li Lei's care. The Li family's doctor said, "Madam, you can't work too hard, and you can't let your emotions fluctuate too much. The first 3 months of pregnancy are the most critical. To put it bluntly, I heard that young Master Xiaowai has just been born. You were very thin when you were pregnant. In fact, it was caused by you not paying attention to maintenance during pregnancy. Fortunately, the young master was born safely. This time, you may not be as lucky as last time. You must take care of yourself and don't put the cart before the horse." Xiaoling caressed her belly, her heart filled with sadness. How can she be calm when there is a newly conceived child on one side and an old friend who is about to die on the other side? However, no matter what, she really didn't want to see anything happen to her unborn little guy. After he fainted at Pei Ziyan's home, she reduced the number of visits to him and mostly communicated with him through WeChat and phone calls. She learned that he was actively preparing for surgery. "Is surgery high risk?" she asked him on WeChat. "I promised you that I will not die." He also typed his reply, "I will seize as long as there is a chance of survival." As he spoke, he coughed and spat out blood on the phone, turning it into a patch of red. Pei Ziyan finally regained his breath for a while, but felt very relieved in his heart. It was great. She was not around and could not see the scene. It was great that WeChat had a typing function. He hastily wiped the blood from the corners of his lips and added a smiley face in his reply. Xiaoling is always uneasy. She checked a lot of medical information and said to Li Lei, "Based on his condition, the risk of surgery is very high. I suspect that he is lying to me and pretending to be nonchalant. I still want to see him with my own eyes." Li Lei frowned slightly. "What about the child in your belly?" She lowered her head, gently caressed her belly, and then raised her head to look at him. "When 3 months is up and the fetus is firmly seated, can you come with me? That way it will be very safe." He finally felt better because she offered to keep him company. After careful consideration, he agreed to her request. Okay, then you must take good care of the baby, and come back as soon as possible after taking a look at Pei Zion. She also nodded in agreement. It was finally 3 months, and she went to visit Pei Zion, accompanied by Li Lei. Li Lei knew that Pei Zion would be unhappy to see him. Thinking about not having to worry about the dying person, he offered to wait outside the ward. Xiaoling turned around and walked into the ward. She turned around halfway and saw his lonely eyes. Her heart rippled slightly, and she turned back, reached out and pulled his head down, and kissed him. "I love you," she said. He looked at her in astonishment and suddenly smiled. "Yes, I know," he said in a very soft tone. She then continued walking towards the ward. No matter how worried she was about Pei Zion, she knew that the only person she loved and wanted to grow old with in this life or even in the next life was Li Lei. She didn't want to cause pain to the man she loved just because of a fate in her past. She was working hard to minimize the impact. "Open the door." Pei Zion was reading a book in the ward. It was a beautifully bound picture album, with a picture of a flying bird, its white wings cutting across the sky. He was shocked when he looked up at her. After a moment, he closed the album and said, "Xiaoling, why are you here?" In just one sentence, he coughed several times, and blood oozed out from his thin lips. Xiaoling's heart clenched tightly at the sight. "It's only been a few days since she last saw you." He was haggard again, so thin that he was almost out of shape. His cheeks were deeply sunken, and the bones and light cyan blood vessels under the skin were clearly visible. She wished that time could freeze so that he would no longer be weak. Finally she stopped crying, and said in as calm a tone as possible, "Let me see you. Have you followed the doctor's instructions for treatment recently? Are you feeling well?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 943. Chapter 943. I accept you as my godfather. Halfway through the words, I still couldn't help but choke up. He smiled faintly. "It's good. You see, I don't have to deal with official duties now. I take a walk every day and look at the picture album." He gestured to the picture album in his hand. "It's a beautiful bird. You may also like it." She lowered her eyes and glanced. "Well, I like it very much." From an angle that he couldn't see, he secretly held back the tears in the corners of his eyes. Wearing a hospital gown, he was so thin that he seemed to have only a skeleton left, but he pretended to be nonchalant. "I was doing preparations for the operation recently. The doctor said that I can have the operation after I recover. I will be fine soon, it will get better." "Xiaoling, don't worry." She nodded and sat with him for a while, forcing a smile, but she didn't know that her acting skills were too poor, and the smile she pretended was uglier than crying. Pei Zion couldn't bear it, and in turn advised her, "Go back, the future is long. There is ample time." These few words are like the most uncertain question in the world. Who knows whether it can be fulfilled? She was reluctant to leave and said, Pei Zion, but didn't know what to say. Pei Zion smiled gently and elegantly, and comforted her. "Don't be sad, the baby in your belly is important. How could I die? I still have to watch your child be born, and accept me as your godfather." She was amused by him. "Okay, when the child is born, I will recognize you as my godfather. Li Lei will probably be very angry, right? He must be angry, and then he orders his children to move the gold and silver to his house. You have to watch carefully and don't let the Pei family be emptied out by the little guy." Xiaoling sniffed, calmed down, and whispered, "You need to get better." He nodded, "I promise." Afraid that she would be upset and hurt her health, I persuaded her to leave after a long time. Watching her back disappear around the corner of the corridor, Pei Ziyan held onto the doorframe, bent down, and coughed violently. The doctor said that his condition was very bad and it was unknown whether he would survive until the day of the operation, let alone the operation. He slowly knelt down on the ground and felt an unbearable dull pain throughout his body. It was the unique pain of late-stage cancer. He had endured it in front of her for a long time, and now he finally couldn't bear it anymore and pressed the emergency bell. In the direction Xiaoling walked out, she could not hear the emergency bell ringing. She returned to the place where she was separated from Li Lei, but did not see Li Lei. She looked around blankly, and after realizing that she was alone, she walked out of the courtyard gate, almost bumping into an oncoming car. Behind her, someone grabbed her. "You are looking for death." It turned out to be Chu Chen. It took her some effort to identify this person from her confused state, and she asked in a daze, "He is going to die, isn't he?" A person's condition cannot be deceived. Pei Ziyan's body has been extremely weak. Can he survive? The chances are slim. She wasn't stupid, she could tell even if he didn't say it. Chu Chen's expression was ferocious. "If you die before he dies, I will kill your whole family. After he dies, you can die however you want, no one will stop you." It turns out he is really going to die. Even Chu Chen, such a loyal dog, said such pessimistic and desperate words. Xiaoling shook her head, looked at him, and suddenly laughed sarcastically. "Chu Chen, what would you do if he died? Once the emperor and the courtier, if it were Pei." She paused slightly. Swallowing Pei Xiu's name, it was related to the selection of the Pei family's heir, and she was not sure whether Chu Chen knew about it. She only said, "If it had been anyone else, I'm afraid you wouldn't be as powerful as you are. Why don't you take good care of him and pray that he lives a long life?" This time it was Chu Chen's turn to sneer. "What about me? It's not your turn to worry about me, so is his life and death." Over the years, he had watched with his own eyes how his boss fell in love with the woman in front of him, even when he was terminally ill. Except for the emperor's shares, which could not be lost to people with other surnames, other assets were all in front of him when he was looking for a lawyer to make a will. This woman takes up the bulk. But what about this woman? When I came to the hospital to see my boss, I even brought Li Lei with me. He was afraid that his boss would see the figure standing at the corner of the corridor and his condition would worsen, so he devised a plan to trick Li Lei away. Looking at Xiaoling, he said, "Li Lei won't be able to come back in the short term. He has urgent matters to deal with. Since the boss cares about you so much, why don't I send you home to save you the chance of something happening on the way? Even if things go wrong, the boss won't be able to live in peace." Xiaoling looked at him. "Where did Li Lei go?" "I met him on the way here. He was on the phone, handling some official business at the headquarters. The affairs at the headquarters were busy. Something big must have happened, so he left before he could even say hello to her." Xiaoling was unwilling to follow Chu Chen. "I appreciate your kindness. I will call the driver to pick him up." Chu Chen shrugged and looked at her on the phone. She dialed Li Lei's number first and got a busy signal, then dialed the driver's number. "I was talking to the driver when suddenly, I heard Li Lei's voice not far from the front. Xiaoling, you have to be careful." His tone was urgent, and his face was full of anxiety. She looked up and saw him running towards her. Before she could react, she felt someone pulling her body into a car. The carriage was very stuffy, and there was a man's arrogant laughter. "Hey, we meet again, my cute little bunny, maybe I should call you sister-in-law." Severe wind. It turned out to be Li Feng. The hairs all over Xiaoling's body stood up. Wasn't this pervert locked up in the dungeon of the headquarters by Li Lei? There are also people who give him medicine every 3 meals a day. If you take that medicine for a long time, it can turn a high IQ elite into an idiot. Why, he is actually fine. You must be wondering how I escaped. right? Li Feng's laughter was cold and smooth, and his snake-like breath brushed against her ears in the darkness. Xiao Lei looks down on me so much, it really makes me sad. Speaking of which, those little pills were really interesting. I gave them to the people guarding the dungeon, and they turned into idiots. They fell to the ground and foamed at the mouth. I just took the key and walked away. Come out. He smiled strangely and charmingly. My cute little rabbit, I heard that you are pregnant with my dear brother's child again. I am so happy. What game can you play this time? His cold hand pressed her abdomen, causing an unspeakable fear to rise in her heart. Li Feng, no, don't hurt the child. He still smiled. Hurt? How can you say it is harm? I am the child's uncle, and I will definitely love it. Let me think about it. What game can make it happiest? Xiaoling felt a tightness in her chest. The moment before she lost consciousness, she grabbed Li Feng's wrist tightly and used her last strength to say, Li Feng. If anything happens to the child, neither Li Lei nor the Xia family will let him go. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 944. Chapter 944 Abnormal Artwork. When I woke up again, I was in a strange place. Xiaoling sat up with her hands on her body and lowered her head to touch her belly. Fortunately, the child should be fine. She breathed a sigh of relief, and when she looked up, she saw a handsome and evil man smiling at her, Li Feng. Today, he was dressed particularly beautifully. A bright red vintage brocade robe embroidered with peonies clung to his slender body. He wore an agate ring on his hand, and his lips were bright red and beaming with joy. His voice was as gentle as ever. Welcome to my territory, dear little rabbit. Xiaoling's heart tightened and she couldn't help but shrink back. If there is anyone in the world who scares her more than the crazy Peizian, it must be Li Feng. This is a real lunatic, a pervert, a demon who kills without batting an eye and takes pleasure in it. If he falls into his hands, he will fall into hell. She couldn't help but tremble, so she tried her best to restrain herself, raised her head and said to him, What do you want? Li Feng looked at her and smiled, his gorgeous phoenix eyes slightly narrowed. Strange and enchanting. Don't be nervous, my dear little rabbit, you have been in a coma for 3 days and 3 nights, and you woke up thanks to my care. You are so wary of me, it will make me very sad. He touched his chest with his hand wearing a sharp finger guard in an exaggerated manner, and the peony flower on his chest was crumpled into a ball and twisted into a ferocious and broken shape. Xiaoling's expression changed. What, she has been asleep for 3 days and 3 nights. Li Lei must be going crazy with anxiety, right? She asked eagerly, Where is Li Lei? He saw you grabbing me into the car, he must have contacted you. Li Feng smiled happily. Li Lei? My brother is so stupid. I escaped from the headquarters dungeon for many days, and he didn't even notice. These days, I have been following you, and I finally caught one opportunity to make a move. That idiot Chu Chen worried Peizian to death when he saw it. I casually revealed to him some information about my escape from the headquarters, and he couldn't wait to make an anonymous call to Xiao Lei and take him out of the ward. Get out of here. You know what happened next. I'm very happy to capture you in front of Xiao Lei. Turns out, it was all his fault. Chu Chen was just used as a spearman by him. Xiaoling's heart was filled with ups and downs, and she secretly scolded Chu Chen for being stupid, but now that the matter had come to this, there was nothing she could do about it. She gathered her emotions and asked Li Feng, Where is this place? Looking around, she saw a Chinese-style room, with beams of sunlight pouring in through the mahogany-carved window frames, and fine dust flying in the air. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. However, with her keen eyesight, she saw through the gable curtain in front of the bed that there were 2 glass vessels neatly arranged on the wall. One of them was as tall as a person, and the other was only more than a foot square. It was filled with an unknown, light yellow liquid. Li Feng let her look at it, and even pointed to the utensils with great interest. Did you notice it too? Aren't they beautiful? No. No, it's not perfect now. Wait until I put you and your children in. Only when they are made into specimens and filled with formalin can they be called works of art. He smiled charmingly, as if he was talking about a very pleasant thing. Xiaoling shivered, remembering that when she first went to the Li family headquarters many years ago and was captured into the snake hall, the man in front of her said that everything Li Lei cared about would be made into specimens. It turns out that to this day, he has not given up on this plan. What to do? A huge sense of crisis hit her heart, causing her heart to stop and her mind to spin rapidly. How could she stop the madman in front of her? All the blood in her body rushed to her brain. She forced herself to calm down and tried to grasp more information. Li Feng, why are you so obsessed with specimens? Are you persistent? He tilted his head and smiled. Don't you think they are beautiful? In fact, I have never understood why Xiao Lei is interested in those weak and ugly creatures, such as kittens, puppies, and rabbits. Oh, yes, and, you. He looked at her with a gloomy expression for a moment, which made her heart tighten. However, he smiled again in an instant. But when I make them into specimens, you can probably understand, Xiao Lei, they are really beautiful, he said in a dreamy tone of admiration. Xiaoling almost vomited after hearing this. She didn't know whether it was the sealing problem of the glass bottle or the psychological effect. She only felt that the air was filled with the unpleasant smell of formalin, which was as disgusting as the man in front of her. She forced herself to calm down and said softly, Li Feng, beauty is not like this. What qualifications do you have to discuss beauty with me? Suddenly, Li Feng became angry, turned around and pinched her slender neck. Yes, Yingling, who are you? Doesn't Xiaoli like you? Doesn't he think you are beautiful? Let me see if he will still be attracted to you after turning you into a specimen. His hand was so strong that she was suffocated instantly. She struggled feebly, but to no avail. The air in her lungs gradually became thinner, and her vision gradually became blurred. Are you going to die here? No, she can't die. She is still carrying a baby in her belly, and she must give birth to the baby safely. Just as his consciousness gradually became unclear, his neck was suddenly released, and air flowed into his lungs again. She was coughing and gasping for air in a miserable state. Li Feng looked at her condescendingly, seeming a little unhappy. The things Xiao Lei likes are always so weak and will break with the slightest touch. It's really boring. She panted for a long time before she found her voice again. You won't kill me. Li Feng smiled. Kill? This word is really rough. He squatted down and raised her chin with 2 fingers. His tone was as cold and smooth as a snake. I just want to make you into a work of art. My little girl, do you know what a work of art is? Who knows what kind of artwork this pervert is talking about? She doesn't want to know at all. However, in the current crisis, she had to bite the bullet and ask, what is it? Li Feng smiled again, did not answer, licked his red lips and stood up. He walked to a square box next to the table and pressed the button. A red indicator light flashed on the blind door. Only then did Xiaoling realize that the box disguised as an antique furnishing was actually a video recorder. Hi, Xiaoli. Li Feng said hello to the video recorder, very cheerfully. I haven't seen you for 3 days. I wonder if you miss me? That goodbye in the hospital must be very unforgettable for you. Don't be too touched. Oh, I have a more unforgettable gift for you soon. He. He turned around, pulled out a dagger from the bookshelf on the side, and walked towards Xiaoling step by step. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 945. Chapter 945 The Cruelest Revenge. An ominous premonition enveloped Xiaoling's body. No matter how stupid she was, she now understood what Li Feng was going to do, and couldn't help but say, "Don't mess around, Li Feng, don't do something that everyone will regret." Li Feng turned a deaf ear and walked back to her. He easily restrained her with one hand and held the dagger in his other hand, gesturing at her graceful and slender neck. "I heard that you are a phoenix. I specially ordered a craftsman to make a handle with a phoenix totem and inlaid with rubies. Do you like it?" His eyes were shining with bloodthirsty and excitement, making him look like they are all full of energy. "It matches you very well." Speaking, he licked his tongue. That disgusting and sticky expression made Xiaoling tremble with fear. She tried her best without giving up. "Don't be like this. We are all a family. What can't we say? If you kill me, Li Lei will be sad. He will always remember me." Li Feng's voice was soft, and the cold tip of the knife pressed against her neck. She didn't dare to speak or move. Li Feng smiled. "You look scared, why bother? Let me tell you what a wonderful thing this is. This dagger will go all the way down your neck and disembowel you alive. The little thing inside will also be cut in half. No, no, don't worry, I won't cut it in half. It's more interesting to dig it out intact, in front of you, alive. Throw it into formalin and drown it directly. You fall in a pool of blood and look at it, your beautiful eyes full of despair, then you struggle and die with it. How perfect, so perfect. Ha 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 ha. Crazy, he is really crazy." Xiaoling no longer cared that the sharp dagger would scratch her throat, and begged, "Don't do this, please." Small drops of blood rolled down one after another along with her words. Li Feng looked at the bright red spots on her fair neck, and his eyes became dark. He stretched out his fingertips and wiped it, then put the blood into his mouth to taste. His voice was hoarse. "No wonder Xiaolei likes you so much. I also like this kind of blood." He exerted a little force on his hand, and more blood came out. Xiaoling no longer cared about the pain, and concentrated all her energy on how to save the lives of her children and herself. In the flash of lightning, an inspiration flashed through her mind, and she shouted out, "You think death is the most cruel revenge for him?" Li Feng was slightly startled and moved the dagger a little. "Isn't it?" Severe wind. Ahem. The injury to her throat made her unable to speak very fluently, but she still said desperately, "Killing is the lowest form of practice, and it cannot maximize the pain of others. You can only speak in front of a severe wind." Lei's face hurt me, and he witnessed the scene of blood and flesh flying everywhere. He wanted to save people but couldn't, and watched me and my children die within reach. This is what makes him most miserable. She didn't know if these words were of any use to Li Feng, but she instinctively felt that Li Feng hated Li Lei. Only this hatred supported him to keep looking for trouble for Li Lei, and to destroy Li Lei's happy life at all costs. In this case, let's let the hatred flow more freely. She stared at Li Feng, waiting for his reaction. Li Feng was stunned for a long time before murmuring, "Yes, it hurts so much that I can't bear to die. Why didn't I think of making Xiaolei miserable?" A strange smile appeared on his face, and suddenly he became angry again. "It's all your fault, it's all your fault. It was you who caused me to be arrested by Xiaolei and take a pill of that medicine. Even though I only took one pill, I noticed something was wrong, but how dare you? How dare you harm my unparalleled intelligence?" He was furious, threw away the dagger, and slapped Xiaoling hard. "If I hadn't taken that medicine, how could I have thought of torturing you in front of him? Yes, in front of him. It's better than in the video. It would be much better if I killed you. Ha 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 ha." He became happy and slapped Xiaoling again. A crisp slap echoed in the room. Xiaoling turned her face sideways as a result of the slap, and 5 fingerprints suddenly appeared on her fair skin. However, she didn't care about this. Her eyes were fixed on the direction of the dagger, and she was rapidly thinking about how to save herself. Li Feng stared at her with a pair of snake-like eyes, his chest rose and fell. After a long time, he slowly smiled, I changed my mind. I want to keep you and raise you, until I attract Xiaolei. When he appears, in front of me, when I see you alive and within my reach, I will cut out the little thing in your belly bit by bit, and let him watch you die in pain. In that case, he will definitely die forever. Remember me? Li Feng smiled, his expression unrestrained and enchanting, like a dangerously blooming poppy. Xiaoling felt chilled all over, but she was still relieved deep down. Finally, her and her child's lives were temporarily saved. It's not that she wants to involve Li Lei in this situation, but she knows Li Lei. Since he saw her kidnapped by Li Feng, he will definitely come to save her. There was no point in telling him not to come. For the current plan, we can only take one step at a time. She looked at the man in front of her who was laughing crazily, and carefully moved her body in the direction of the dagger on the ground. However, before she could move to the dagger, Li Feng grabbed her collar again and said, "My dear little rabbit, death penalty can be avoided, but living penalty cannot be escaped. Don't think I don't know, you are using this as a delaying tactic because you want to survive. However, I like this delaying strategy very much, I am becoming more and more interested in you." His hands were cold and slippery, but his grip was tight. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't break free. There was an inexplicable fear in her heart. It was very strange. She knew that her life would not be in danger for the time being, but the fear became even stronger. Her struggle angered him, his eyes turned cold, and he didn't see any movement. He only used one hand to gently flip both of her wrists, and pressed them high above her head. Xiaoling stared at him, "What are you going to do?" He smiled, running his fingers along her still bleeding neck, and opening the skirt of her clothes. "The skin is so white, my dear little rabbit, don't worry, I won't hurt you, be good, and you will enjoy it." She suddenly realized what he was going to do, this beast. "I am your sister-in-law," she said tremblingly, not knowing whether she was scared or angry. "Xiaolei's things are mine," he chuckled, and quickly unbuttoned her second button with his fingers. She was in a panic, twisting her body to avoid it, but he put all his weight on her, breathing close to her ear, "Don't waste your efforts, be careful if I get angry, I will kill you in advance. How should I explain to Xiaolei if I'm playing to death?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 946. Chapter 946. Dear Xiaolei. She shuddered, I'm still pregnant with the baby. If you do this, the baby will die. Li Feng chuckled, biting her earlobe with his teeth. It was so painful that she suspected that he would bite her entire ear off. But his voice was still calm. How could our Li family's baby be so fragile? His hand followed her chest, touched her belly through her clothes, and stopped there. "Baby," he said softly, "look, Daddy will see you through the videotape. Don't die, don't let Daddy down." Not far away, the video recorder on the mahogany carved table flashed a cold red light. This pervert. He wants to record the footage of her torture and send it to Li Lei. Xiaoling struggled desperately and screamed, "Li Feng, let me go. You pervert." However, her resistance only resulted in stronger repression from him. Li Feng's voice was still very soft, with a hint of charming smile, just like a whisper between lovers. "I said, be good." He exerted force on his hand, and only heard a soft click sound. It was he removed one of Xiaoling's arms from her shoulders. "This is a small lesson. If you don't obey again." A burst of unexplained laughter came from his nasal cavity. Xiaoling felt a sharp pain in her shoulder, and cold sweat started to flow down her face. She watched helplessly as she tore open her clothes, revealing the thin sling underneath, but she was unable to resist. Her mind was buzzing, and she pushed him like crazy with her still intact hand. He laughed, sat on her, and reached out to unbutton his trousers. Xiaoling didn't know what she was doing. When she came to her senses, she heard a sharp scream like a slaughtering pig, and she had already retreated to the corner of the room. Li Feng fell to the ground, covering his vital parts with his hands and wailing. Only then did Xiaoling realize that she had kicked him in the vitality at the critical moment. She didn't know whether this kick had crippled him. However, this was not the time to think about this. She hurriedly grabbed the dagger on the ground, opened the door, and ran out. The corridor is very dark, as if it were built in a cave. The walls are natural stone walls covered with moss, and there are snake totems everywhere. Occasionally, sporadic guards patrolled by, probably Li Feng's subordinates. Xiaoling carefully avoided the guards, her mind was in chaos, and she only relied on instinct to remember the survival knowledge that Li Lei taught her when she had nothing to do. When you are lost, just walk in one direction. Where there is light, there are places where there is light, where there is wind, where there is the sound of water, these are all possible exits. She felt the direction of the wind carefully and ran away. Finally, she saw a faint light at the end. She was overjoyed and quickened her pace. However, as soon as she arrived there, she was shocked. Where was the exit? There was clearly a cliff below. If she hadn't stopped quickly, she would have fallen. She was shocked and took a few steps back. The tip of his toe kicked a small stone, and the stone rolled down and fell into the cloud-covered cliff and disappeared without a trace. After a long, long time, there was no echo. You really me off this time? A cold voice came from behind. Xiaoling suddenly turned around and saw Li Feng. The man looked extremely embarrassed. His bright red robe embroidered with peonies was wrinkled and his face was still very pale. He was walking with a limp, as if some secret part of his body was still hurting. He looked at Xiaoling ferociously. You can't escape. Xiaoling had no way to retreat, so she raised the dagger in her hand and pointed it at him. The mountain wind on the cliff roared, causing the corners of her plain white skirt to fly like clouds. Her hair was messy and her expression was as pale as the strong wind. Li Feng licked his lips and smiled. Do you think this thing is useful to me? Don't be naive, little girl. Even if I don't do anything and only send 2 people to guard you here, you will be hungry in less than 3 days. Die. Xiaoling knew that what he said was right. However, she was not willing to become his prisoner again. You had no intention of letting me live until Li Lei. Even if I starve to death, so what? She stared into his eyes. You tried to do something worse than a beast to me, Li Feng. If the baby dies, I can't survive. Waiting for Li Lei to kill me and the child in front of him is nonsense. Li Feng smiled gloomily. You really want to die in front of my dear brother? I don't mind, but I also want to see if you can seize the opportunity. Look! He pointed to the ground. Xiaoling lowered her head and even stopped breathing. She saw a few drops of bright red blood on the stone ground. At first, she thought it was dripping from her neck, but then she remembered that when she was fleeing, she tore off the corner of her skirt and wrapped it around the wound on her neck. This blood is a sign of miscarriage. She looked at the blood stains on her skirt and felt a bolt from the blue. I can save you, Li Feng smiled sinisterly, as long as you throw the dagger off the cliff and walk in obediently. Xiaoling couldn't believe him at all, but other than that, there was no other way to think of it. She forced herself to calm down and emphasize to him, Li Feng, don't forget that I am the phoenix of the Xia family. If I have any shortcomings, you and your family will be finished. Threatening me, Li Feng was not afraid at all. If I could be scared, I wouldn't have kidnapped you from the hospital in S City. Little girl, what does it have to do with me whether the Li family will be destroyed? Even if the whole world is destroyed, so what? What Li Feng wants to do, is unstoppable. His narrow eyes shined in the dark passage. Xiaoling felt a chill in her heart. What conditions could she negotiate with such a person? Her body was still bleeding, and she could feel the warm liquid snaking along the inner side of her thighs. The child, it was urgent to protect the child. She gritted her teeth, raised her hand, threw the dagger off the cliff, and walked back into the passage. Face to face with Li Feng. Li Feng raised his hand and slapped her, making her dizzy and hitting her against the hard mountain wall. Before she could react, he grabbed her long hair again, pulled her head and hit it against the mountain wall, once, twice. Until blood flowed from her forehead and dyed her cheeks red. This way, it looks much better. Li Feng finally let go and let her slowly fall to the ground. He smiled, took out a miniature camera from his arms, and said to the camera, "Dear Xiaolei, did you see it? I was having a lot of fun with your beloved little rabbit. Don't worry, I will take care of it. Good for her, neither she nor her children will lose their lives. Only by living well can they play happily with me, right?" Speaking, he stuck out his tongue, licked the camera lens, and turned off the video. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 947. Chapter 947 Code. Xiaoling was put back into the room again. The mahogany moon bed, fine gauze curtains, and all the utensils were all given to her by Li Feng. However, her daily diet was very poor. Sewage mixed with mortar and mud, and spoiled and rancid food constituted her entire source of nutrition. She tried to reason with Li Feng, "My body can't bear it, and neither can my child. If Li Lei doesn't come to save me, he will die." Li Feng smiled enchantingly, "Don't worry, how could I be willing to let you die? My dear brothers and sisters, I have prepared a doctor for you a long time ago. He will maintain the vital signs of you and your child at the lowest safety level. As long as you think of your child, Lei saw you skinny but helpless, I'm really excited." He recorded her appearance, with messy hair and blood all over her body. He didn't even give her cutlery. Every time he came in, he would just dump the smelly food on the floor, the bed, and her body. He watched her squat down with difficulty and pick up the food on the ground bit by bit with her hands to eat. Often, there were some earthworms and cockroaches mixed in. She was so frightened that she screamed, but for the sake of her children, she had to continue to eat the food. She looked pale and her spirits were getting worse and worse. Li Feng was very happy, sending the video to Li Lei every day, enjoying Li Lei's angry but helpless look. "My dear brother," he said to Li Lei in the video communication, "do you feel bad? What's there to feel bad about? You ate these earthworms and other small things on the battlefield, and so did I. We many brothers and subordinates in the family have eaten it. If she can't stand it, how can she be worthy of being your wife?" Li Lei tried his best to control himself and calm down. "She is different, don't go too far." However, this is not instant messaging at all, or even two-way communication. All the videos were sent to Li Lei's mailbox by Li Feng from several IP addresses. Li Lei used all the means, but he couldn't find the videos at all. The true source. The Li family's satellites, the Xia family's positioning system, and even the government search systems of several countries with good relations, all found nothing. Xia Moyan told him, "Li Lei, I can only rely on you to save her this time. Xiao Ling is someone who is too close to me. Fortune tellers cannot calculate themselves or the clear fortunes of people close to them, so it is impossible to use metaphysical methods to locate her accurately. You must find a way to rescue her." Li Lei deeply felt the great responsibility on his shoulders. He forced himself to calm down. "Li Lei, don't be anxious. There is a way, there must be a way. As long as she is not found for a day, she will not die for a day, and Li Feng will not let her die easily. He washed it with cold water with his face open and eyes that were blood red. After not having a good sleep for several days and nights, he started a new round of search. Xiaoling, hold on. However, as time passed day by day, he knew better than anyone else that this was not going to work. With Li Feng's character, he will definitely be tempted to save people, and then find ways to torture them. And now that there are no clues to save people, it can only mean that Li Feng is not ready to win. Once Li Feng is ready to release clues, I'm afraid, even if he finds it, it will be too late. Li Lei became more and more anxious and devoted all the manpower of the Li family to the search. Xiaoling's situation is getting worse and worse. The baby is 4 months old. I don't know if it's an illusion. Occasionally, she can feel the faint fetal movement in her belly. The baby seems to be very uncomfortable, always hungry and uncomfortable. She often touches her lower abdomen, while soothing the baby. I told myself, Xiaoling, she is still so young, how can you feel her emotions? These are all hallucinations produced by you being imprisoned for a long time, it must be. Now, she can already refer to the baby as she. Everything was thanks to Li Feng, who asked the doctor to check the gender of the child during her daily examination. Girl, Li Feng smiled coquettishly after learning the test results. How wonderful, with Xiao Hui and now a daughter, you and Xiao Lei are both dragons and phoenixes. Xiaoling brought some looking at him with fear and wariness. He said nothing. Li Feng smiled to himself and looked down at the long and sharp armor on his hands. I don't know what it would be like to use these hands to dig out your daughter in front of Xiao Lei. It must be like that, it's very pleasant, ha 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 ha. Xiaoling took a deep breath and said in a weak voice, I want to see him. Who are you meeting? Xiao Lei, Li Feng was still smiling, my little rabbit, don't be impatient. When I prepare the execution ground, I will let Xiao Lei in to reunite with you, be good. Xiaoling smiled sadly, her eyes a little dull. I always feel that my health is very bad recently, and I may not be able to survive that day. Li Feng, I want to tell him personally that I am pregnant with a daughter, please help me once. Okay. She was shaking, as if she would fall down in the next second and never wake up. Li Feng looked at her for a long time. Women are trouble, such annoying and fragile creatures. If her wish is not fulfilled and she really dies prematurely due to grief and shock, how can this game continue? Li Feng frowned and thought for a long time, and finally gave in reluctantly, the location here must be kept secret. I won't let you have a direct video call with him. However, you can record what you want to say into the videotape, so that he can saw it. I warn you, don't play any tricks, otherwise, I won't mind digging out your child in advance. She was ecstatic and promised repeatedly that she would never play any tricks. Li Feng enjoyed her embarrassed appearance in front of the camera. After filming her picking up the rotten rice and vegetables on the ground and eating them, he mercifully recorded what she wanted to say to Li Lei. Xiaoling looked at the camera as if she were looking at her long-lost lover. Li Lei, I'm still alive, and the child is also alive, don't worry. Li Feng checked me out, it's a girl, you must come and save us, from now on, we will have children and a daughter. She said, gently touching her belly with one hand. Li Feng turned off the video recorder without waiting for her to say more. Maybe it was the words must come to save us that pleased Li Feng. In the following days, his attitude towards Xiaoling was better than before. Although he was still a bad person, he no longer hit or scolded her frequently. Xiaoling took the time to recuperate, praying secretly in her heart that her little moves would be discovered by Li Lei. In S City, Li Liza carefully read the message she recorded, not missing every detail. When he saw it for the second time, he suddenly stopped and zoomed in on the scene, and his eyes fell on her stroking her belly. Hands. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 948. Chapter 948 Sniper. Generally, when pregnant women caress their lower abdomen, their palms are facing inward to cover it. Xiaoling did it before, but this time it was different. One of her fingers seemed to move outward inadvertently, and the tip of her finger seemed to be stained with something. It was a kind of moss. Li Lei recognized the message she wanted to show him. He suddenly stood up from his chair and told his subordinates, "Give me the order, immediately analyze the type and place of growth of this moss, and rescue people as quickly as possible." Xiaoling was imprisoned in the room. Every day is so confusing that I can only tell the time by the number of meals delivered. She didn't know what was going on outside, and she didn't know if he had seen the message she painstakingly conveyed to Li Lei. The moss was picked off the wall when she kicked Li Feng down and escaped from the room. When Li Feng grabbed her hair and slammed her against the wall, she endured the severe pain and hid it. She prayed to God that luck would be on her side this time. Maybe God heard her prayer. Not long after, Li Feng suddenly kicked open the door angrily and strode in. He was still wearing a beautifully embroidered brocade robe today. However, as if he was anxious, the brocade robe got hung up on the rocks beside the cave wall on the way here, and he looked extremely embarrassed. He grabbed Xiaoling's long hair, dragged her out without mercy, and said, "Bitch, you still sent a message to Xiaolei without telling me. I asked you to throw you into the pit to feed Go Snake. Come on, don't you want to die? I will kill you and the evil in your belly today." Xiaoling was dragged by him and staggered. She endured the pain and reluctantly followed his footsteps to prevent herself from falling. Through the maze-like dark corridor, when she was completely disoriented, panting, and could no longer hold on, the strong wind threw her onto a stone platform. She was panting, in shock, and had a dull pain in her lower abdomen. She protected her abdomen in a panic, but heard Li Feng sneer, "You are worried about your child when you are about to die. In a while, she will be buried with you. Look." He pointed to the bottom of the platform, "These are the children I collected from all over the world, how wonderful." Under the platform, there was a burst of fishy stench. Xiaoling looked over and found that they were in a huge cave. There was actually a snake pit below, 100 or 200 meters square. There were all kinds of colorful snakes swimming in it. Nausea and nausea. A narrow bridge that looked very weak was precariously erected over the snake pit, leading to the platform on her side. Above the platform was a sling, and Li Fengzheng tied her to the sling with deft hands and feet. "What are you going to do?" Xiaoling struggled. Li Feng smiled happily, "Did you hear the sound? Xiaolei is leading a group of people from the Li family to attack here. He is so desperate, how can I not give him a surprise? Let us see, he is the one who conquered this place. The speed here is faster than the speed of disemboweling you and feeding it to snakes." His crazy and sharp voice echoed endlessly in the cave. At this time, Xiaoling also heard the faint gunshots outside, which became more and more intensive, and the sounds of fighting became clearer. Not long after, she saw a group of people rushing in. The leader was covered in blood. His handsome face looked like a Shura in the dim light of the cave. He looked at the platform with a murderous look. "Li Feng. Let go of Xiaoling." It was Li Lei, he was finally here. Xiaoling was so excited that she was about to cry and shouted, "Li Lei." Li Feng smiled arrogantly, "Welcome to the snake cave, my dear brother. You and my dear brother and sister are really married. I don't know what method you used to find this place in advance," he said. He pinched Xiaoling's chin from behind, very hard, as if he wanted to crush her bones. Li Lei's voice was cold, "Let her go." Li Feng smiled happily, and his sharp armored fingers tore through Xiaoling's clothes in one swipe, leaving a long blood stain on her already thin body. "Since you can't wait, Xiaolei, I don't mind disemboweling her right in front of you." He licked Xiaoling's earlobe, tightened his grip, and stabbed Xiaoling with his sharp armor like a tofu. "Body of..." Xiaoling screamed in pain, fearing that Li Lei would be worried, so she held it back tightly. Her face was pale, she was sweating a little and nodded with her forehead lowered. She instinctively turned her body sideways, trying to avoid the vital points of the child in her belly. At the other end of the snake pit, Li Lei's eyes were red. He raised his gun and shot at Li Feng. However, the range of the pistol could not hit Li Feng, who was several hundred meters away. Li Feng smiled wildly, and the end of the armor gently turned on Xiaoling's soft abdomen, which made her almost faint from the pain. "I'm going to show you what disembowelment is." Li Feng pulled out the armor from her lower abdomen, raised it high, and was about to drop it even more viciously. Suddenly, a red dot appeared on the cave wall beside Li Feng. It was a small, but cold light spot, which made people feel chilled. "Sniper," Li Feng's expression changed, and he instantly looked at the source of the light spot. However, the terrain in the cave was complicated. From his perspective, there was only darkness in the distant depths of the cave. "No, it's impossible," Li Feng murmured, suddenly raising his voice to Li Lei. "I know this cave too well. The sniper position that can shoot here is too far. From such a long distance, the best sniper in the world can't either. Don't try to scare me." Li Lei calmed down. "Whether it's true or not, you can try it." Li Feng looked at him gloomily, and suddenly smiled wildly. "He couldn't hit me at all. The red dot was on the wall next to me. Ha ha ha. If he could hit me at this angle, he would have shot long ago. Right? Ha 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 ha." Li Lei frowned. How could this lunatic brother be so cautious at this juncture? That's right, the angle of the sniper rifle is limited. Although the deviation is only a few meters, it really can't hit Li Feng. Otherwise, Li Lei has no doubt that the sniper will blast Li Feng into pieces immediately. He looked at Li Feng coldly and said, "Yes, with your current position, the sniper can't hit you. But if you disembowel Xiaoling, believe it or not, the moment you reach out, the sniper can hit you. Use up your hands." Li Feng looked at him seductively. "This sniper position is too far away. I don't believe there is anyone in the world with such accurate marksmanship. Li Lei, the person targeting you is named Xiaomoyan." "Xiaomoyan? Brother is here too." Xiaoling perked up and desperately told herself to hold on. She also cooperated with Li Lei to threaten Li Feng. Brother's marksmanship has always been very accurate. You can't treat him according to normal human standards. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 949. Chapter 949, Save Xiaoling even if you die. Li Feng hesitated when he heard that the sniper turned out to be Xiaomoyan. Xiaoling is right. How can we use common sense to judge the master? He narrowed his eyes and looked at Xiaoling. It would be wonderful if he and Xiaoling could die together. I'm afraid Xiaoli I would never forget him in this life, but the speed of bullets is always faster than the knife. He knew very well that while he was still alive, before Xiaoling was disemboweled, the bullet would have destroyed his hand first. Don't make unnecessary sacrifices. After thinking about this, Li Feng laughed eerily. What a pity, my dear brothers and sisters, I can't cut out your child with my own hands, but don't worry, I have prepared a set of measures to deal with such emergencies. Backup plan. Look, he pointed to another small platform not far away. There was a chainsaw and a huge meat grinder on it. The two machines were connected by a steel cable, and the steel cable crossing the snake pit, the shackles hanging on Xiaoling's hands were also connected. Xiaoling's face turned pale again. Li Feng smiled like a child showing off his beloved toy to an adult. Isn't this chainsaw and meat grinder good? Xiaolei, your beloved woman will be suspended across the snake pit by a steel cable, and then split lengthwise by the chainsaw. Open, the children in her belly will be split in half at the same time, then, their bodies will be minced into pieces and flowed down the snake pit to feed my group of snakes. It's really interesting, isn't it? Haha. After he finished speaking, he pressed a red button and the steel cable slowly started to rotate. Xiaoling, Li Lei was so anxious that his voice changed its tone. Xiaoling was hung on the steel cable, unable to resist the huge mechanical force, and her body slowly moved towards the electric saw. Li Lei didn't have time to think too much. He stepped onto the narrow bridge not far away that connected the snake pit to the platform, and was about to save her. However, as soon as he stepped on it, a snake suddenly flew up from the pit and bit him. He dodged instinctively, relying on his instinctive reflexes that he had honed over the years in life and death situations. The narrow bridge beneath his feet shook violently, almost causing him to fall into a snake pit. He steadied himself, still in shock, when he heard Li Feng's laughter coming from nowhere. Xiaolei, Xiaolei, this is the small bridge I specially prepared for you, is it fun? Ha ha ha. These flying snakes, there are not many, but they are enough to add a lot of fun to your journey. Be careful not to be bitten by them, and don't fall into the snake pit. Your dear little rabbit is still waiting for you to save it. Ha 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 ha. I don't know what equipment he used, but the laughter seemed to come from all directions. Li Lei looked up and saw that Li Feng could no longer be seen where the platform was. He took a deep breath and concentrated on it. Even if there were many difficulties and obstacles ahead, he would definitely reach there and save his beloved woman. Li Lei, it was Xiaoling's voice. Her hand was hung in the air and she slid towards the chainsaw little by little. There was a cry in her voice, "Go back. Don't come over. Do you hear me? Those snakes are colorful and have extremely gorgeous triangular heads. They are extremely venomous at first glance." Li Lei gritted his teeth and didn't answer, and continued to walk forward step by step. He had to rescue her before she was cut in half by the chainsaw. Another flying snake jumped up, and he dodged again. On the other side of his body, another flying snake bit him at an extremely tricky angle. It was inevitable to avoid it. "Li Lei," Xiaoling cried out. There was a bang gunshot, and a cloud of blood mist suddenly exploded in the air. The snake flying towards him was hit by the bullet and was instantly broken into two pieces. The snake's body fell weakly and fell into the snake pit. Tens of thousands of snakes were vying for food. In an instant, only a white skeleton was left. Xiaoling was so shocked by what she saw that she completely forgot that she was in danger and only prayed that Li Lei was safe. Li Lei gritted his teeth and continued to move forward. Another snake flew up. This time, without him having to dodge, the bullet landed steadily on the snake. Like its unlucky predecessor, it also transformed in mid-air. A cloud of blood mist was quickly swallowed up by his companions. That's Xiaomoyan's sniper rifle. Stable and accurate. Xiaoling is right. He is indeed no ordinary person. He is the only one who can hit a target at a distance that no sniper in the world can hit. He hid behind a distant hole, narrowed his eyes and aimed at the snake pit, covering Li Lei's progress, one shot after another. The two of them cooperated perfectly, and Li Lei moved closer to the rooftop little by little. Another snake flew up. Xiaomoyan pulled the trigger and was about to fire a shot. Suddenly, a man came out from behind and was about to pierce his heart with a dagger. Xiaomoyan was concentrating on it. When the man appeared, he was unprepared. He just moved to the side slightly based on instinct, barely avoiding the vital point, but he still let out a muffled groan and was immediately injured. "Haha, I think I am so powerful, but the Imperial Master is nothing more than that." A cool and smooth voice sounded, like a fierce wind. "This is the Snake Cave, his old lair." When he was targeted by a sniper rifle on the rooftop just now, he guessed the location where the sniper was ambushed, pressed the chainsaw button, and moved over quietly. He raised his leg and kicked Xiaomoyan to the ground. He looked at the bright red blood blooming on Xiaomoyan's white clothes and smiled strangely and wantonly. I am really excited to be able to kill the Imperial Master with my own hands. He slowly said. He slowly leaned down, his whole body trembling with excitement. Although Li Lei was his main target, it was undeniable that being able to trample under his feet a man like Xiaomoyan who was feared by the whole world also gave him a shuddering pleasure. He licked his lips, raised the dagger in his hand, and stabbed Xiaomoyan. Although Xiaomoyan has a noble status and is unpredictable in mystical skills, for fighting with real guns and live ammunition, he is only good at sniping. In terms of close combat, he was no match for a battle-experienced man like Li Feng. He watched helplessly as the dagger stabbed towards his heart, but was unable to avoid it. At the critical moment of life and death, suddenly, there was another gunshot. This time, a blood flower bloomed on Li Feng's chest. He opened his eyes wide and slowly fell down in disbelief. Who, you? The shot did not hit his vital part, and he struggled. Want to look back? Xiaomoyan also looked behind him, his expression as calm as water. You're here. Behind him, a tall, godlike man stood. Although his face was sallow and full of disease, his cold and bloodthirsty eyes made him look like the god of death from hell. Pei Xian stepped forward step by step, kicked away the strong wind, and pulled Xiaomoyan up. Li Lei hasn't walked across the bridge yet. He coughed and said to Xiaomoyan, keep shooting to cover. Even if he dies, we have to wait until Xiaoling is rescued. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 950. Chapter 950. Blood soaked through clothes. Xiaomoyan was seriously injured and his white clothes were soaked in blood. However, for the safety of his sister, he still managed to hold the sniper rifle and used all his willpower to aim at the flying snake in mid-air, one after another, maintaining the life passage on the short bridge. Li Lei has been bitten twice by flying snakes. This kind of snake is venomous. Although he knew that Li Feng liked venomous snakes before he came to rescue people, and he had taken some protective measures for this, such as injecting antidotes, but after all, he could not be completely unaffected. The injury made his actions difficult. Gotta get clumsy. He trudged forward under the cover of gunfire, and finally reached the platform where Li Feng was standing before, and turned off the button of the steel cable. The steel cable in automatic operation suddenly stopped. Xiaoling, who was suspended in mid-air, also stopped only half a foot away from the chainsaw. However, she is on another isolated platform. Xiaoling, hold on, Li Lei shouted to her from a distance. Xiaoling looked at him with tears in her eyes. The hem of her skirt was almost caught in the chainsaw. If he hadn't arrived in time, she and the baby would have turned into a puddle of flesh. However, the cramping pain in her lower body became more and more severe. She didn't dare to imagine what the baby's condition was like now, so she forced herself to focus all her attention on Li Lei and said to him with a cry, "Be careful." Li Lei was covered in blood, and he couldn't tell whether it was from the enemy or just bitten by a snake. He gestured to her as if it was okay, took off his coat, formed a strip of cloth, hung it on the steel cable, and slid towards her in the air. The violent exercise accelerated the blood flow in his body, and the snake venom was raging, making his mind dizzy. He took a strong breath, slid to the platform on her side, and carefully released her from the hanging steel rope. "Come down." "Xiaoling, are you okay?" he asked hurriedly. Xiaoling choked up and couldn't speak, she could only shake her head. He glanced at her. She was wearing a thin dress, which had been torn from the chest all the way down by the strong wind, and could barely cover her body. What's even more terrifying is the long thin blood mark left on her fair skin. If it were just a little deeper, it would be enough to disembowel her. Li Lei was frightened for a while, so he straightened her clothes and carried her on his back. "Hold on to me," he said to her. "This platform is full of snakes on all sides. I'll take you back to the platform above, and then we can cross the bridge to safety." The snakes all over the pit were boiling with excitement. They raised their heads high and looked at them on the platform while spitting out red silk threads. Xiaoling raised her head and glanced at the platform where he jumped over, and said in an unsteady voice, "Can we climb over? There is a between the two platforms." The place they were currently on was slightly lower, so Lilei was able to swing down so quickly using the rope made of his clothes. "But if you want to swing back from here, you have to walk from low to high, which is much more difficult." Lilei's voice was calm and powerful, like a mountain, soothing her heart. "It's okay, just hold me tight, I won't make fun of you and your child's life." Child. Xiaoling only felt severe pain in her lower abdomen. She didn't know how the child was doing. Is she still alive? She continued to treat, and the snakes under the platform gathered more and more. There were even a few flying snakes that relied on the power of their accumulated companions. Several times, they almost flew onto the platform. It won't be long before this platform will be swarmed by snakes. There is no other way. Xiaoling quickly recognized the situation and hugged Lilei's back tightly. Lilei said, "Hold on tight." He grabbed the thick steel cable with all his strength, alternated his hands, and moved slowly and hard towards the platform above. His physical strength has always been very good, and even though he is injured now, he is still much stronger than ordinary people. In addition, Xiaoling has become inhumanly thin these days, which has relieved him a lot of burden. But even so, carrying the weight of two adults, it was still extremely difficult to climb up in the opposite direction. Sweat dripped down his forehead and soon soaked his whole body. His hand holding the steel cable was trembling, and he almost slipped several times. However, when he thought of the life of the woman and child he loved on his back, he gritted his teeth and persisted, and persisted. Xiaoling didn't dare to speak or move. She even breathed carefully. She was afraid that she would disturb him and cause him to accidentally miss and fall into the terrifying snake pit. Under the steel rope, countless colorful snakes followed the place where his sweat and blood dripped. The hissing became louder and louder, and flying snakes kept jumping up, trying to bite their bodies. Through the soaked clothes, she could feel his muscles that were stretched to the extreme, as if every ounce of strength in his body was being squeezed and used mercilessly, making unreserved efforts for their survival. Suddenly, his hand slipped, the two lost their balance, and almost fell into the snake pit. "Ah!" Xiaoling exclaimed. Lilei managed to stabilize her body in a thrilling way, but this slip caused them to move back nearly half a meter. You know, when she had just climbed up half a meter, she felt as if a century had passed. Long. He was breathing heavily and sweating heavily. At his feet, there were flying snakes one after another. Even with the cover of Xiaomoyan's sniper rifle, Xiaomoyan, who was injured, could not accurately hit every flying snake. There was a thick snake that almost touched the feet of Lilei and Xiaoling, but was kicked away by Lilei. Lilei, she looked at the platform above that seemed far away, opened her mouth, and said with a sob, "Put me down, if only one person can survive, put me down." She was afraid. Unprecedented fear, she was really afraid that he would not be able to persist to the end and the whole family of three would be buried in a snake pit. If God is destined for her death, she doesn't want to drag him down. Lilei was still breathing heavily. He paused for a while and then said, "Don't make trouble." Clenched his teeth, exerted force, and moved up with difficulty. The steel rope was dangerous, and the pile of snakes below were chasing him more and more closely. Flying snakes kept jumping up, and one time they even bit his calf. She heard his painful groan, then gritted her teeth and climbed up. Xiaoling clung to his shoulders, and the clothes on her lower body were tied in clever knots around his waist, tying the two of them tightly together. At this moment, she just wanted to find a handy tool to cut off the clothes that were in the way. Maybe then he could reduce his weight and climb up the platform alone to survive. Her tears fell like broken beads. Unfortunately, without a sharp weapon, even if she let go, she would not be able to fall directly into the snake pit. Instead, the sudden loss of control would bring greater obstacles to him. Xiaoling was anxious and scared. What on earth should she do? End of this chapter.